Jamal Harrison, 19-year-old son of tech billionaire Marcus Harrison, sits frozen in first class as flight attendant Valerie Whitman's hand connects with his face, the sharp crack silencing the cabin. Other passengers gasp in shock, phones instantly recording the scene. Jamal reaches for his phone, blood trickling from his lip while Valerie smugly declares, "Call whoever you want. You people don't belong in first class anyway." Security approaches as Jamal speaks into his phone. "Dad, they just assaulted me." What happens when privilege collides with prejudice at 30,000 feet? Before we begin this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. And if you believe justice should be blind to color, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more true stories of courage against discrimination. Jamal Harrison wasn't like other billionaires' sons. At 19, the MIT computer science prodigy preferred public transportation over private jets, modest clothing over designer labels, and genuine connections over flaunting his father's wealth. Marcus Harrison, founder of Harrison Technologies and one of the richest black men in America, had raised his son to understand both privilege and prejudice. "Money might open doors," Marcus often told him, "but some people will always see your skin first." Today was supposed to be a simple cross-country flight from Boston to San Francisco for a tech conference. Despite his father's insistence on using the family's private jet, Jamal had pushed back. "Dad, I need to live in the real world," he had argued. "I can't develop technology to help people if I'm completely disconnected from how they actually
live." Eventually, Marcus relented, but insisted on a first-class ticket. The trouble began at the boarding gate where the attendant, a thin woman with pinched lips, scrutinized Jamal's ticket repeatedly. "This is for first class," she said,
her tone implying a question. "Yes, I know," Jamal replied politely, accustomed to such interactions. "Can I see your ID again?" she asked, despite having already checked it twice. The man behind Jamal, a middle-aged executive type clutching an identical first-class ticket, wasn't subjected to the same scrutiny. The gate agent barely glanced at his documentation before waving him through with a smile. Once aboard, Jamal settled into his spacious seat, pulling out his laptop to review his presentation on algorithmic bias in facial recognition technology. The irony wasn't lost on him as he noticed several passengers doing double takes when they passed his seat. When the pre-flight beverage service began, flight attendant Valerie Whitman methodically worked her way through the first-class cabin. "Champagne, sir?" she offered the businessman across the aisle. "Sparkling water, ma'am?" to the woman in front. But when she reached Jamal's row, her eyes slid past him to the passenger behind. Jamal raised his hand slightly. "Excuse me, could I get some water, please?" Valerie seemed startled, as if noticing him for the first time. "I'll come back around," she said curtly, before moving on. She never did. As the flight reached cruising altitude, Jamal noticed the air conditioning vent blasting directly overhead, chilling him. He pressed the call button to request a blanket. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. Eventually, he pressed it again. Still nothing. On his third attempt, a different flight attendant appeared, looking annoyed. "Yes?" she asked sharply. "I was wondering if I could get a blanket," Jamal said. "We're pretty busy with the meal service," she replied, despite the fact that no meal service had begun. "I'll see what I can do." Another 20 minutes passed without a blanket. Meanwhile, Valerie had delivered one to an elderly white woman without being asked. From his seat, Jamal could see Valerie at the front galley, whispering to 2 other crew members while occasionally glancing in his direction. He didn't need to hear their words to recognize the familiar pattern. But then, as a businessman passed by to use the restroom, Jamal clearly heard Valerie mutter to her colleague, "Probably stole someone's boarding pass. Should we alert the captain?" Jamal felt his chest tighten. He'd experienced countless microaggressions before, but hearing a flight attendant openly suggest he didn't belong, that he might be a criminal simply for occupying space in first class, cut deeper than he expected. His father's warning echoed in his mind. Some people will always see your skin first. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that he had every right to be there. He was a paying passenger, a brilliant student, and the son of Marcus Harrison. But in Valerie Whitman's eyes, he was just another black kid who didn't belong in the premium cabin. Little did either of them know that this flight would change both their lives forever and expose a pattern of discrimination that would shake an entire airline to its core. Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for yourself only made things worse? That's exactly what happened to Jamal, as this ordinary flight turned into a nightmare at 30,000 feet. After being ignored for nearly an hour, Jamal decided enough was enough. He unfastened his seatbelt and approached Valerie, who was arranging drinks in the galley. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I've been trying to get some assistance. I requested water several times and pressed my call button 3 times for a blanket." Valerie turned, her expression hardening. "Sir, you need to return to your seat. We're experiencing turbulence." Jamal glanced around at the perfectly smooth flight. "There's no turbulence, and the seatbelt sign is off. I'd just like the same service everyone else is receiving." "Are you questioning how I do my job?" Valerie's voice rose, attracting attention from nearby passengers. "Let me see your boarding pass again." "You've already seen it during boarding, and again when you skipped me for drinks," Jamal replied, his frustration growing, but his tone remaining measured. "Well, I need to see it again," Valerie insisted, hand outstretched. Reluctantly, Jamal pulled out his phone to show his electronic ticket. "See? Seat 3A, first class." Valerie scrutinized the screen as if searching for evidence of forgery. "This doesn't look right. How did you get this ticket?" Before Jamal could answer, a woman from across the aisle interjected. "Is there a problem here?" It was Karen Benson, a blonde woman in her 40s who had been watching the interaction with narrow eyes. "No problem, ma'am," Jamal replied. "Just trying to get some water." "Well, you're being very aggressive," Karen said loudly. "I don't think people like you should speak to staff that way." Jamal's stomach dropped at the unmistakable implication in people like you. He took a deep breath. "I'm simply requesting the same service as other passengers." "You don't look like you belong in first class," Karen continued, emboldened by Valerie's approving nod. "Did you get upgraded or something?" The conversation had attracted the attention of Captain James Ritter, who emerged from the cockpit. Tall with silver hair and an authoritative presence, he surveyed the scene with a frown. "What's going on here, Valerie?" he asked. "This passenger is being disruptive," Valerie replied promptly, demanding special treatment and refusing to show proper documentation. "That's not true," Jamal protested. "I've shown my ticket multiple times. I just want water and a blanket like everyone else." Captain Ritter turned to Jamal with a stern expression. "Sir, if you're causing problems, we can divert this flight and have authorities meet us." "Problems? I'm just asking to be treated equally," Jamal said, pulling out his MIT student ID and driver's license along with his phone. "Here are all my documents. My name is Jamal Harrison. I'm a student at MIT heading to a technology conference." The captain barely glanced at the identification. "These could be fake. Counterfeit IDs are quite common." Jamal couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had provided multiple forms of legitimate identification, yet was still being treated like a criminal. "This is discrimination," he said firmly. "I'm recording this interaction for my own protection." He pulled out his phone and began filming, which caused Valerie to step back dramatically as if threatened. "He's recording us without consent," she exclaimed. "That's against airline policy." "Actually, there's no law against recording in public. Spaces on domestic flights," Jamal countered, his voice calm despite his racing heart. Captain Ritter's face darkened. "Listen, young man. If you continue causing a disturbance, I'll have no choice but to divert this plane. Is that what you want? To inconvenience everyone because you aren't getting special treatment?" Jamal stood his ground. "I don't want special treatment. I want equal treatment." That's when Valerie lunged forward unexpectedly, grabbing Jamal's wrist. "Give me that phone. You can't record us?" Do you think Jamal was right to stand his ground? Comment number 1 if you believe he should have continued recording to protect himself. Or comment number 2 if you think he should have complied to avoid escalation. Don't forget to hit that like button if you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination in customer service settings. And make sure to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that expose injustice in our society. What happens when a Flight attendant physically assaults a passenger, and how far will an airline go to cover it up? Stay tuned to find out how this confrontation turns from bad to unbelievable. Instinctively, Jamal pulled back to protect his phone, causing Valerie to stumble slightly on her heels. Her face transformed from annoyance to rage in an instant. "He assaulted me!" she shrieked, steadying herself against the galley counter. "This passenger just assaulted a crew member." "What? I didn't touch you," Jamal protested, still backing away, phone recording. "You grabbed me. It's all on video." The captain stepped between them, facing Jamal. "That's enough," he growled. "Assaulting a flight attendant is a federal offense." "I didn't assault anyone. She grabbed my wrist," Jamal insisted, holding his phone higher to capture everything. That's when it happened. Valerie stepped around the captain and, with shocking speed, slapped Jamal hard across the face. The crack echoed through the first-class cabin, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Jamal staggered back, tasting blood where his lip had split against his teeth. The shock of being struck rendered him momentarily speechless as passengers gasped. "He attacked me first," Valerie declared loudly for everyone to hear. "I acted in self-defense." The absurdity of her claim might have been laughable if the situation weren't so serious. Jamal, slim and several inches shorter than Valerie, had never made any threatening move. "That's a lie," called out an older black woman from row 5. "We all saw her hit him unprovoked." "Stay out of this, ma'am, or you'll be considered an accomplice," Captain Ritter warned. Within seconds, a man in plain clothes stood up from the back of first class, pulling out a badge. "Air Marshal Davis," he announced, moving toward Jamal. "I need you to put down your phone and put your hands where I can see them." "Sir, please look at the recording first," Jamal pleaded. "She assaulted me. I did nothing wrong. Phone down now." The air marshal's hand moved to his hip, where his weapon was holstered. Jamal slowly lowered his phone but continued the recording. "I'm complying, but I want it on record that I'm being targeted because of my race." "Always playing the race card," Karen muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. The air marshal took Jamal's phone but didn't stop the recording. Instead, he placed it in his pocket. Then he pulled Jamal's hands behind his back and applied handcuffs, tightening them until they bit into Jamal's wrists. "This is completely unnecessary," protested a middle-aged white man in a business suit. "The kid didn't do anything wrong." "Sir, interfere with my duties and you'll be restrained as well," the marshal replied without looking up. Several other black passengers began to voice objections, but each was swiftly threatened with arrest. White passengers who seemed sympathetic to Jamal exchanged uncomfortable glances, but remained largely silent, unwilling to risk their own safety. "Take him to the back," Captain Ritter instructed the air marshal. "We'll have police waiting when we land." As Jamal was marched through the cabin, he felt dozens of eyes on him, some pitying, some fearful, some openly hostile. He'd experienced racism before, but never so blatant, so public, and with such immediate consequences. While being secured in an empty row at the back of the plane, Jamal managed to whisper to the air marshal, "Can I at least call my father to let him know what's happening?" "You'll get your phone call when we land and you're in custody," the marshal replied coldly. "What am I being charged with exactly?" Jamal asked. "Interfering with a flight crew, assault on an airline employee, and potentially making terrorist threats." "Terrorist threats? I never threatened anyone." The marshal shrugged. "That's what the captain and flight attendant are claiming. Said you made them fear for the safety of the aircraft." Jamal's mind raced. A federal terrorism charge could mean years in prison, even with the best attorneys. His entire future could be destroyed because a racist flight attendant didn't think he belonged in first class. While the marshal was distracted by a call from the cockpit, Jamal managed to shift his body enough to reach the emergency cell phone in his sock that his security-conscious father had always insisted he carry. With his hands cuffed behind him, he blindly pressed what he hoped was the speed dial for his father. When he felt the vibration indicating the call had connected, he whispered urgently, "Dad, it's an emergency. I'm on United Flight 237 from Boston to San Francisco. The flight attendant slapped me. They're falsely accusing me of terrorism and I'm handcuffed. They're planning to arrest me when we land in about 2 hours. There's video on my main phone which they've confiscated." He heard his father's voice start to respond, but the marshal returned, and Jamal had to shift again to hide the phone. As the marshal moved away once more, Jamal heard his father's final words. "Don't worry, son. By the time you land, they'll wish they'd never touched you." What Jamal didn't know was that this incident would escalate far beyond a simple case of airline discrimination. It would expose a systematic pattern of abuse, trigger a national reckoning, and forever change how the airline industry addressed racial bias. But for now, handcuffed and facing terrorism charges, all Jamal could do was hope his father's influence would be enough to save him from a system designed to presume his guilt rather than his innocence. Marcus Harrison was in the middle of a boardroom meeting with 20 of Silicon Valley's most powerful tech executives when his emergency line vibrated. As the founder and CEO of Harrison Technologies, a company valued at over $70 billion, interruptions during high-level meetings were strictly forbidden. But the emergency line was different. Only his son Jamal and his wife Sophia had that number. He excused himself with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. "Gentlemen, ladies, please continue without me for a moment. James, take over the projection." In the hallway, Marcus listened to his son's desperate whisper, his expression transforming from concern to cold fury. When the call abruptly ended, he stood motionless for 3 seconds, processing what he'd heard and formulating a response. Those who knew Marcus Harrison well understood that this momentary stillness was not indecision, but the calm before a storm. He made 3 calls in rapid succession. The first was to his head of security, former FBI Assistant Director Raymond Washington. "Ray, Jamal is being held on United Flight 237 from Boston, landing in San Francisco in approximately 2 hours. They're claiming terrorism charges after a flight attendant assaulted him. I need everything you have on the flight crew, the marshals on board, and the airline's senior leadership within 30 minutes. And get our legal team in the air now." The second call went to his longtime friend and United States Senator William Chen. "Will, I need a favor. Jamal is being detained on false charges. I need you to contact Homeland Security immediately. This is racial profiling at its worst, and I won't let them destroy my son's life." The third call bypassed secretaries, assistants, and gatekeepers, connecting directly to United Airlines CEO Richard Pearson's personal cell phone. "Pearson," came the curt answer. "Richard, it's Marcus Harrison." A pause. "Marcus? This is unexpected. If this is about the technology contract, I've already told your team that we're considering all vendors equally, and my son Jamal is currently handcuffed on your Flight 237 after one of your flight attendants slapped him across the face. They're threatening terrorism charges because he asked for water and a blanket while flying first class." Another pause, longer this time. "That sounds... There must be some mistake or misunderstanding. If a physical altercation occurred, I'm sure there's more to the story than..." "There is no misunderstanding," Marcus cut in, his voice deadly calm. "My 19-year-old son, a student at MIT with no criminal record, was publicly humiliated, physically assaulted, and is now facing federal charges because your employees couldn't handle seeing a young black man in first class. There is video evidence, Richard. Evidence that will be in the hands of every major news outlet within the hour, unless I hear that the entire flight crew has been detained for questioning upon landing. Marcus, be reasonable. I can't just order the detention of an entire flight crew based on a phone call, even from you. There are procedures, unions, regulations. You have exactly 1 hour to handle this internally, Richard. After that, the video goes public. I file a $1 billion lawsuit against your airline for racial discrimination and assault. And I use every resource at my disposal to ensure that the world knows exactly how United Airlines treats black passengers. Your stock will drop 30% before the closing bell." Marcus could almost hear Pearson sweating through the phone. Harrison Technologies not only provided critical software for United's booking systems, but was also preparing to bid on a multi-billion-dollar technology overhaul for the entire airline. Beyond that, Marcus Harrison's influence extended throughout the business world, politics, and media. "I'll look into it immediately," Pearson said finally. "Don't look into it. Fix it." Marcus ended the call. Back in his office, Marcus received the information package from his security team faster than requested. The captain, James Ritter, had 2 previous complaints of racial discrimination that had been quietly settled. Flight attendant Valerie Whitman had a concerning pattern. 6 complaints over 15 years, all from minority passengers, all dismissed without action. More troubling was what his team discovered about United's internal policies. Despite public commitment to diversity, their internal training materials barely addressed racial bias, and their complaint investigation process seemed designed to protect the company rather than address legitimate grievances. As Marcus assembled his response team, a new complication arose. Senator Dennis Bradford, chairman of the Transportation Committee and recipient of substantial airline industry donations, had called Pearson. Reports indicated he was pressuring the airline CEO to handle the situation quietly and not cave to pressure tactics from Harrison, no matter how wealthy he is. Marcus's phone rang again. It was Raymond. "Boss, we've got movement. United Flight 237 has been diverted to Sacramento due to a security concern. FBI agents are being dispatched to meet the plane, along with local police." "Whose orders?" Marcus demanded. "Unclear. Could be standard procedure for an air marshal. Request. Could be Pearson trying to look proactive, or could be Bradford trying to control the situation." Marcus considered this development. Sacramento would mean different jurisdiction, different agents, and potential confusion that could either help or hurt Jamal. "Get our legal team to Sacramento now, and call Chen back. I want to know if this diversion came from Homeland Security or the airline." Within minutes, Sacramento International Airport had transformed into a hub of unusual activity. News vans began arriving, tipped off by an anonymous source about a major security incident involving a high-profile passenger. Federal agents assembled near a remote hangar where the flight would be directed. Police vehicles lined the tarmac. What no one had anticipated was the power of social media. Despite the crew's attempts to enforce a no-phones policy after the incident, several passengers had managed to record portions of the confrontation. One video, showing Valerie clearly slapping Jamal while he made no aggressive moves, had already been uploaded to Twitter from the plane's Wi-Fi and was spreading rapidly with the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack. As the plane began its final approach to Sacramento, Captain Ritter's voice came over the intercom, noticeably tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a security situation, we've been diverted to Sacramento. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened after landing until authorities provide further instructions." What Captain Ritter didn't tell the passengers was that the authorities waiting on the ground had very different instructions than he expected. Instead of arresting Jamal Harrison, they had orders to detain the entire flight crew for questioning. The airline's attempt to cover up a racist incident was about to backfire spectacularly, exposing years of systematic discrimination that had been hidden from public view. As the wheels touched down on the Sacramento runway, neither Jamal nor the crew realized that this was just the beginning of a battle that would eventually reach the highest levels of corporate America and the federal government, forever changing the conversation about race, privilege, and accountability in the airline industry. Have you ever watched as someone powerful suddenly realized they were trapped by their own actions? That moment when justice finally catches up to those who thought they were untouchable? That's exactly what was about to unfold on the tarmac at Sacramento International Airport. As Flight 237 taxied to its designated position, passengers pressed their faces against windows, gawking at the extraordinary scene outside. Police vehicles, black SUVs with federal markings, and news vans formed a perimeter around their aircraft. This wasn't the standard welcome for a diverted flight. Inside the cockpit, Captain James Ritter was receiving confusing information. He'd expected local authorities to board the plane and arrest the troublemaker in seat 3A. Instead, the control tower was instructing him to bring the aircraft to a remote hangar area where federal authorities were waiting to interview all crew members involved in the incident. "This must be a mistake," he muttered to his co-pilot. "Call dispatch again." Before the co-pilot could respond, a stern voice came over the radio. "United 237. This is FBI Special Agent Daniels. Upon reaching your designated position, please shut down engines and open the main cabin door. All flight crew members involved in the incident with passenger Harrison are to exit the aircraft first with their hands visible. Ritter exchanged a panicked glance with his co-pilot. What the hell is going on? When the aircraft finally stopped, the cabin remained tensely silent. Valerie Whitman paced nervously in the galley, repeatedly whispering to her colleagues, "Just stick to the story. The passenger was aggressive and threatening. I acted in self-defense after he made physical contact." As the cabin door opened, 4 federal agents boarded. Their expressions were grim as the lead agent announced, "Captain James Ritter. Flight. Attendants Valerie Whitman, Thomas Reynolds, and Sarah Jenkins. You are being detained for questioning regarding the alleged assault of passenger Jamal Harrison. Please gather your personal items and exit the aircraft." "This is outrageous," Valerie protested. "That man assaulted me. He made threats against this aircraft." "Ma'am, we have preliminary video evidence contradicting that claim," the agent replied coldly. "Please cooperate or you will be restrained." The shock on Valerie's face was evident as handcuffs were produced. Captain Ritter, attempting to maintain some dignity, straightened his uniform and addressed the agents. "There must be some misunderstanding. We were following standard protocols for an unruly passenger." "We'll discuss the details at the field office, Captain," came the curt reply. As the crew was escorted off, passengers were informed they would need to remain on board while statements were collected. At the back of the plane, the air marshal reluctantly uncuffed Jamal under the watchful eye of a senior FBI agent. "Mr. Harrison, are you in need of medical attention?" the agent asked, noting the dried blood on Jamal's lip. "I'm okay," Jamal replied, rubbing his wrists. "What happens now?" "We'll take your statement and return your phone. Your father has arranged for legal representation to meet you here." Meanwhile, in a secure room at the airport, the interrogation of Valerie Whitman had begun. Despite being shown the damning video evidence, she maintained her fabricated narrative. "The video doesn't show everything," she insisted. "He was aggressive before that. He threatened me." "In what way was he threatening?" asked Agent Daniels. "His presence was intimidating. He wouldn't take no for an answer when I told him we were busy." "His presence was intimidating?" the agent repeated skeptically. "Can you elaborate on what specifically about his presence intimidated you?" Valerie hesitated, aware she was treading dangerous ground. "He's a large man," she finally said. "Mr. Harrison is 5'9" and weighs 160 pounds, Agent Daniels noted. "That's below average for an adult male. Would you like to revise your statement?" In another room, Captain Ritter was attempting to distance himself from Valerie's actions. "I didn't see the actual slap," he claimed. "I was attempting to de-escalate the situation. Yet you supported detaining Mr. Harrison and planned to have him arrested on terrorism charges without investigating what actually occurred," the interviewer pointed out. "I was relying on my crew's assessment of the situation. Even after, multiple passengers contradicted that assessment." Ritter had no good answer. The airline's public relations team was already in crisis mode. As video clips spread across social media, United's call center was flooded with angry customers threatening to cancel reservations. Their stock had dropped 8% in just 30 minutes of trading. At the same time, Karen Benson, the passenger who had sided with Valerie, was giving her own statement to authorities. "The young man was quite rude," she insisted. "He was demanding special treatment and being aggressive. We have statements from 12 other passengers who say he simply requested water and a blanket after being repeatedly overlooked for service," the agent replied. "They described his demeanor as polite but firm." Karen's face flushed. "Well, I felt threatened by him." "Can you describe specifically what he did that threatened you?" Like Valerie, Karen struggled to articulate her discomfort without revealing her bias. "It was just a feeling I had," she finally said. What none of them knew was that Karen Benson wasn't just a random passenger. She was the sister-in-law of United's Vice President of Operations, a connection that would soon raise serious questions about whether this was truly a random incident or something more coordinated. As statements were being collected, Jamal was reunited with his phone and shocked to discover that clips of the incident had already gone viral. Justice for Jamal was trending nationally, with celebrities, politicians, and civil rights leaders weighing in. But the most disturbing development came when FBI agents informed Jamal that records showed the crew had entered his name into a security database with a flag for suspicious pre-flight behavior before the plane even took off, despite him doing nothing unusual during boarding or security screening. "They were targeting you from the beginning," explained Agent Daniels. "The question is why? Do you think airlines should implement mandatory bias training for all employees?" Comment number 1. If you believe racial sensitivity training could have prevented this incident. Comment number 2. If you think stronger penalties and oversight are the only real solution. Don't forget to like this video if you've ever witnessed discrimination being disguised as security concerns, and subscribe for more stories that expose injustice hiding in plain sight. What could possibly explain why this crew targeted a well-mannered college student from the moment he stepped on board? And how deep does this discrimination really go in the airline industry? Stay with us to uncover the shocking truth behind Flight 237. By nightfall, the incident on Flight 237 had exploded into a national conversation. What began as smartphone videos shared by passengers had transformed into wall-to-wall coverage across every major news network. The hashtag #JusticeForJamal had been used over 2 million times on Twitter. Celebrities were canceling their United Frequent Flyer memberships publicly. Civil rights organizations were announcing plans for protests at major United hubs. CNN displayed split-screen coverage. On one side, the growing crowds of protesters at airports. On the other, legal analysts discussing the potential criminal charges the flight crew might face. Fox News took a different angle, with one commentator suggesting that there might be more to the story than the edited videos show, and questioning whether Marcus Harrison was using his wealth and influence to control the narrative. MSNBC had already aired a special report titled "Flying While Black," featuring interviews with minority passengers sharing similar experiences of discrimination on commercial flights. In a hastily arranged press conference, Marcus Harrison stood before a forest of microphones, his expression stern but controlled. Flanked by his attorneys and civil rights leaders, he spoke with measured fury. "Today, my son Jamal, a dedicated student with a perfect academic record and no history of behavioral issues, was physically assaulted for the crime of requesting equal service while being black. The flight attendant who struck him has a documented history of similar incidents that United Airlines chose to ignore. The captain who supported false terrorism charges against my son has previously been accused of racial discrimination." Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled reporters. "This is not about one flight, one crew, or even one airline. This is about a pattern of discrimination that continues to poison our society. My son was lucky. He had the resources and connections to fight back. But what about the thousands of young black men and women who don't have a billionaire father to call when they're being mistreated? Who speaks for them?" The questions came rapid fire after his statement. When asked about potential legal action, Marcus was unequivocal. "This isn't about money. It's about accountability and systemic change. We will not accept a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. We will not allow this to be buried. The world will know exactly what happened, and those responsible will face consequences." As Marcus spoke, United Airlines stock continued its free fall, dropping a total of 23%, before trading was temporarily halted. The company had issued a brief statement claiming they were investigating the incident thoroughly, and that they did not tolerate discrimination of any kind, but the public wasn't buying it. The Flight Attendants Union initially released a statement supporting their members and emphasizing the challenges of maintaining aircraft safety, but as more video evidence emerged, they quickly backpedaled, stating that, if misconduct occurred, appropriate action should be taken. Meanwhile, Jamal remained in Sacramento, still being questioned by federal authorities. Despite his father's influence, the investigation into the terrorism allegations couldn't be instantly dismissed. The system moved at its own pace, even for the son of Marcus Harrison. The air marshal who had detained Jamal was now claiming that Captain Ritter had specifically requested that he monitor the suspicious passenger in 3A before any interaction had occurred. This suggested a level of premeditation that transformed the incident from a heat-of-the-moment conflict to something potentially more sinister. While Jamal waited to be cleared, a disturbing development occurred online. Seemingly authentic documents began circulating showing a criminal record for Jamal Harrison. including charges of assault and disorderly conduct. News outlets, hungry for a new angle, began reporting on these records, suggesting that perhaps the flight crew had legitimate reasons for concern. It took less than 3 hours for Marcus Harrison's security team to prove the documents were sophisticated forgeries, created and disseminated after the incident. The metadata revealed they had originated from an IP address linked to a crisis management firm retained by United Airlines. Rather than diffusing the situation, this apparent attempt to smear Jamal's reputation poured gasoline on the fire. United lies joined Orchard justice for Jamal as a trending topic. Calls for boycotts intensified. Competing airlines, sensing blood in the water, began offering special fares for passengers who could prove they had canceled United reservations. Behind the scenes, Marcus Harrison received an unexpected call from Richard Pearson, United's CEO. "Marcus, things have gotten out of hand. We need to resolve this amicably before more damage is done." "Amicably," Marcus repeated. "My son is still being investigated for terrorism charges your crew fabricated. Your company attempted to smear his reputation with forged documents, and you think we can resolve this amicably?" "Those documents weren't authorized by senior leadership," Pearson insisted. "Some overzealous people in our crisis team made a terrible decision. They've been terminated." "Not good enough, Richard. I want the names of everyone involved in targeting my son, from the moment he checked in until those forged documents appeared. I want to know who made the decisions, who approved them, and who looked the other way." Silence stretched before. Pearson replied, "You know I can't do that, Marcus. There are privacy laws, union contracts." "Then I can't help you, Richard. The lawsuits will proceed. The boycotts will continue. And your company will serve as an example of what happens when racism is protected by corporate power." As night fell on the West Coast, Jamal was finally cleared of all allegations and released to his father's legal team. The footage from his phone had been verified as authentic and unedited, destroying any claim that he had behaved inappropriately. Yet even as one battle ended, another was just beginning. This incident had shone a spotlight on practices that had long existed in shadows, and powerful interests were already mobilizing to ensure those practices remained hidden from public view. What none of them realized was that Marcus Harrison had anticipated their moves and was prepared for a war that would extend far beyond a single flight or airline. With Jamal safely ensconced in Sacramento's most exclusive hotel suite, Marcus Harrison shifted from defense to offense. He assembled an elite team of investigators, data analysts, and former law enforcement officials with a clear mission. Expose the full extent of discrimination at United Airlines and the systems that protected it. Within 48 hours, they uncovered disturbing patterns. Captain James Ritter had been named in 3 previous discrimination complaints, all settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. Valerie Whitman had 6 similar complaints from minority passengers over her 15-year career, none of which resulted in disciplinary action. More damning was what they found about United's internal processes. The airline maintained a customer conflict database that supposedly tracked problematic passenger behavior. Analysis revealed that Black and Middle Eastern passengers were flagged at rates 5 times higher than white passengers for identical reported behaviors. Marcus's team also discovered that United's board of directors had repeatedly rejected proposals for enhanced bias training, citing cost concerns despite spending millions on other initiatives. Armed with this information, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his legal team. "We're not just filing a civil rights lawsuit," he announced. "We're pursuing this as a class action on behalf of every minority passenger who's experienced discrimination on United flights. And we're requesting that the Department of Justice open a civil rights investigation into their practices." As Marcus prepared his legal assault, United's damage control machine shifted into high gear. CEO Richard Pearson requested a private meeting with Marcus, away from lawyers and the media. They met in a discreet conference room at a neutral location. Pearson arrived with a single document: a settlement offer for $20 million, conditional on a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent Jamal and Marcus from discussing the incident publicly. $20 million for a slap, Pearson said, sliding the document across the table. "That's generous by any standard, Marcus. This can all go away today." Marcus didn't even glance at the paper. You still don't understand, Richard. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. Everyone has a price, Pearson insisted. Name yours. Systemic change, Marcus replied instantly. Public acknowledgement of the problem. Transparency. About past incidents. Mandatory bias training with real consequences for violations. External oversight of your complaint process. That's my price. Pearson's expression hardened. That's not realistic. The shareholders would revolt. The union would fight it at every step. Then we have nothing to discuss. Marcus stood to leave. Wait, Pearson said, his tone shifting. You need to understand what you're up against. Marcus, United has relationships throughout the business world, government, and media. Your technology contracts aren't just with us. Push this too far and you might find doors closing that were previously open to you. Marcus paused, studying Pearson with new interest. Are you threatening me, Richard? I'm explaining reality. You're powerful, but you're one man. The system is bigger than both of us. As Marcus left the meeting, he knew Pearson wasn't bluffing. The next day, Harrison Technologies received notification that 3 major government contracts were being reviewed. 2 potential corporate clients suddenly postponed negotiations that had been nearly finalized. Then, the media attacks began. Business publications ran articles questioning Harrison Technologies' market valuation. Anonymous sources suggested Marcus had leveraged foreign investments in ways that might trigger national security concerns. Conservative commentators began asking why a billionaire was playing the race card, instead of acknowledging his son might have behaved inappropriately. The counterattack extended to Jamal as well. Right-wing websites published photos of him at college parties, suggesting he had a history of aggressive behavior when intoxicated, despite no evidence supporting such claims. His MIT academic records were mysteriously leaked, with suggestions that his admission had been based on factors other than merit, despite his perfect GPA. Marcus had anticipated this response. He'd built his career overcoming systemic racism, and he recognized the familiar patterns of how power protected itself when challenged. What he hadn't anticipated was how personal and vicious the attacks would become. The escalation came during a CNBC interview when the host asked CEO Pearson about the ongoing situation. Believing his microphone was off during a commercial break, Pearson muttered to someone off camera, "If Harrison thinks his money makes him white, he's about to learn. Otherwise." A production assistant, disgusted by the comment, ensured the hot mic moment reached social media within hours. The backlash was immediate and severe. United stock, which had begun to stabilize, plummeted another 17%. Corporate clients publicly announced they were severing relationships with the airline. Celebrities and influencers posted videos cutting up their United credit cards. Pearson was forced to resign the next day, but the damage was done. His mask had slipped, revealing the ugly truth behind the corporate facade of diversity and inclusion. What began as a tragic incident involving one passenger had exposed a culture of discrimination that reached the highest levels of the company. As United's board scrambled to contain the damage, appointing their first black CEO and announcing a comprehensive review of their practices, Marcus received an unexpected call from a former United flight attendant who had left the company after reporting racial discrimination. "Mr. Harrison, what happened to your son isn't an isolated incident," she explained. "There's a group of us who've documented similar cases for years. We tried reporting through proper channels. We tried going to the union. Nobody would listen. But we kept records, detailed records, and we're ready to share them if it will help make real change." This was the breakthrough Marcus had been waiting for. Insider testimony and documentation would transform the case from one incident to a pattern of behavior that couldn't be dismissed or settled away. What United didn't realize was that their aggressive counterattack hadn't weakened Marcus's resolve. It had only confirmed how necessary this fight truly was. Have you ever discovered that what seemed like an isolated incident was actually part of something much larger and more sinister? That moment when scattered puzzle pieces suddenly form a disturbing picture? That's exactly what happened as the Harrison investigation peeled back layers of deception at United Airlines. The FBI investigation, initially focused on the specific incident involving Jamal, had expanded dramatically. Agent Daniels, who had first interviewed Jamal on the tarmac, now led a task force examining United's handling of discrimination complaints over the past decade. "Mr. Harrison," Daniels explained during a confidential briefing with Marcus and his legal team, "we've uncovered evidence of a systematic effort to suppress and dismiss racial discrimination complaints across multiple levels of the organization." The agent displayed internal documents showing that United maintained a separate review process for complaints filed by minority passengers. These complaints were flagged for special handling by the airline's risk management team rather than their customer service department. Effectively, Daniels continued, they created a system designed to make legitimate complaints disappear. Of the 287 discrimination complaints filed by minority passengers over the past 5 years, 0 resulted in disciplinary action against employees. The documents had been provided by whistleblowers from within United's corporate structure, emboldened by the public attention on Jamal's case. Even more troubling was what they discovered about the crew that had targeted Jamal. Captain James, Ritter's social media accounts, scrubbed immediately after the incident but recovered by FBI forensic technicians, revealed concerning connections to white nationalist groups. His private Facebook posts included derogatory comments about minority passengers and colleagues. Flight attendant Valerie Whitman had no obvious extremist connections, but her personnel file contained 6 prior incidents similar to what happened with Jamal. In each case, Black or Middle Eastern passengers in premium cabins had reported discrimination and hostile treatment. Each time, the airline had dismissed these reports as misunderstandings or necessary security measures. As the investigation expanded, other passengers began coming forward with their own stories. A pattern emerged. Minority passengers in first or business class were disproportionately subjected to extra scrutiny, received inferior service, and faced aggressive enforcement of minor rules that white passengers routinely ignored without consequence. "This isn't about one flight crew or one incident," Marcus told reporters. "This is about a corporate culture that enabled and protected discriminatory behavior." The airline's new leadership responded by announcing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and hiring a respected civil rights attorney to oversee an independent review of their practices. But these moves came too late to stem the flood of revelations. Perhaps the most shocking discovery came when investigators linked Karen Benson, the passenger who had supported Valerie's false claims against Jamal, to United's leadership. She wasn't merely a random passenger, but the sister of Executive Vice President Michael Benson, who oversaw flight operations. Phone records revealed she had called her brother immediately after the incident, before any public reporting, and that he had subsequently contacted the airline's crisis management team. This suggested coordination in how the incident was handled, and raised questions about whether Karen Benson had been planted on the flight to support Valerie if any issues arose with minority passengers. The conspiracy theories that initially seemed far-fetched now appeared increasingly plausible. Was Jamal randomly targeted? Or had he been identified before boarding as someone who could be provoked into a reaction that would justify removal? Meanwhile, Jamal had returned to MIT, attempting to resume his studies despite the media circus surrounding him. But even there, he wasn't safe from the airline's reach. Late one night, Jamal returned to his dorm room to find the door ajar. Inside, his laptop was missing, along with specific research files related to his work on algorithmic bias in security systems. Campus police classified it as a routine theft, but Marcus's security team wasn't convinced. The timing was too convenient. Just days earlier, Jamal had mentioned to a reporter that his MIT research project analyzed how facial recognition and passenger screening systems exhibited racial bias. His work specifically examined how airlines and airport security might inadvertently or deliberately target minority travelers through supposedly neutral algorithms. "They're trying to silence him from multiple angles," Marcus told his head of security. "First, character assassination, now trying to steal his research. They're scared of what he knows." The investigation took another turn when federal agents discovered that United's head of security had ordered the deletion of specific passenger complaint records just hours after the incident with Jamal made national news. Digital forensics experts were able to recover many of these files, revealing dozens of incidents similar to Jamal's that had been deliberately concealed. As each new revelation made headlines, other passengers came forward with their own experiences. What began as one incident on one flight had ballooned into the largest civil rights investigation in the airline industry's history. Senator William Chen, Marcus's longtime friend, announced that the Senate Transportation Committee would hold hearings on discrimination in commercial aviation. "We need to determine if what happened to Jamal Harrison is an anomaly or indicative of industry-wide problems that require legislative remedy," Chen stated. Industry analysts speculated that United might not survive the scandal intact. Between boycotts, lawsuits, and federal investigations, the financial damage was already approaching billions. Other airlines, fearful of similar scrutiny, began preemptively reviewing their own complaint handling procedures and announcing new anti-discrimination initiatives. What do you think is the most effective way to combat systemic racism in major corporations? Comment number 1 if you believe external regulation and oversight are necessary because self-policing doesn't work. Comment number 2 if you think consumer pressure and boycotts are more effective than government intervention. If you've experienced or witnessed discrimination that was later denied or minimized by those in authority, hit that like button to show solidarity with others who weren't believed. And don't forget to subscribe for the continuation of Jamal's fight for justice and accountability. How far will United's executives go to protect themselves? And what powerful allies will emerge to help the Harrisons in their most desperate hour? The battle is about to escalate to levels no one could have predicted. Marcus Harrison had experienced corporate warfare before, but never with stakes this personal. As the United scandal entered its third week, he assembled a war room at Harrison Technologies headquarters. The gleaming conference room was filled with the best legal minds, investigators, and communications experts money could buy. "They're organizing a coordinated counterattack," explained Sophia Mendez, former prosecutor and now lead counsel for the Harrison family. "United has hired Black Diamond Crisis Management. They specialize in reputation rehabilitation and opposition research." Marcus nodded grimly. "I'm familiar with their work. They represented that pharmaceutical company that hiked prices on cancer drugs, then manufactured a charity story to distract the public." "Exactly," Sophia continued. "Our sources indicate they're pursuing 3 strategies simultaneously. First, character assassination of both you and Jamal. Second, political pressure through their industry connections. Third, dilution through competing narratives." As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed with a news alert. Securities and Exchange Commission announces investigation into Harrison Technologies' international contracts. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The SEC investigation focused on technology transfers to European partners, completely legal transactions that had been thoroughly vetted by compliance teams. But the mere announcement of an investigation would create uncertainty, potentially affecting stock price and business relationships. "They're using their political connections," Marcus noted calmly. "Who's the current SEC commissioner again?" "Jonathan Wells," replied Raymond Washington, his head of security. "Former partner at Delvin & Ross, the law firm that represents United's parent company." The character attacks intensified across multiple fronts. Conservative media outlets ran stories questioning how Marcus had built his fortune, implying impropriety despite his well-documented rise from middle-class roots through legitimate innovation and business acumen. For Jamal, the attacks were more personal and insidious. An anonymous email to MIT's Academic Integrity Committee suggested his recent research had been plagiarized. Though easily disproven, the accusation triggered an automatic review process, creating stress and uncertainty during finals week. Even more concerning was the discovery that Jamal's scholarship funding had suddenly come under review. The foundation that provided his merit scholarship, despite his perfect academic record, had cited budget constraints and revaluation of priorities in a letter questioning continued support. Investigation revealed the foundation's largest donor was a venture capital firm whose managing partner sat on United's board of directors. "They're trying to disrupt Jamal's education," Marcus observed. "They can't attack him directly anymore because the public is watching, so they're using indirect pressure points." The Harrison legal team filed injunctions and made formal complaints about these obvious retaliatory actions, but legal processes moved slowly compared to the rapid-fire attacks. Meanwhile, former victims of discrimination on United flights who had initially agreed to testify were backing out one by one. Some cited family concerns, others employment issues, but the pattern was clear. They were being pressured or threatened. Maria Johnson, a black executive who had experienced treatment similar to Jamal's the previous year, forwarded Marcus an email she'd received. Consider how a public discrimination claim might affect future employment opportunities. It came from an anonymous address but was traced to a server used by Black Diamond Crisis Management. The media landscape was shifting too. After 3 weeks of intense coverage, news stories were pushing the United scandal off front pages and out of news cycles. A celebrity scandal, a political controversy, and an international crisis all seemed to emerge simultaneously, dividing public attention. "This isn't coincidence," insisted Raymond. Black Diamond is known for creating diversionary stories. They can't make the United problem disappear, so they're flooding the zone with competing narratives. Marcus received a call from Senator Chen with more troubling news. "The Transportation Committee hearings are being delayed indefinitely," Chen explained apologetically. "Bradford claims they need to gather more information before proceeding, but that's nonsense. He's carrying water for the airline industry." Despite the mounting pressure, Marcus remained resolute. When an intermediary approached with another settlement offer, now $50 million, he didn't even bother responding. Instead, he reached out to other influential black business leaders, forming an alliance to combat what was clearly becoming a bigger fight than one family against one airline. Tech entrepreneurs, entertainment executives, sports team owners, and financial leaders joined forces, pooling resources and influence. Their first joint action was purchasing full-page advertisements in major newspapers nationwide with a simple message: discrimination isn't a PR problem. It's a moral failure. The ads listed dozens of discrimination cases that had been settled, quietly with NDAs across multiple industries, revealing the pattern without violating specific agreements. But just as this alliance was gaining momentum, the Harrison family received the most direct attack yet. Their home security system detected an intrusion at their San Francisco residence at 3:17 a.m. Nothing was stolen, but a message was left on Jamal's bedroom mirror, written in what appeared to be red paint: "Stay in your place." The local police classified it as a simple breaking and entering, despite the obvious targeted nature of the message. Marcus immediately upgraded security at all family properties and hired round-the-clock protection for Jamal at MIT. The message was clear. Powerful interests were willing to go to extraordinary lengths to protect themselves from accountability. What had begun as a simple request for equal treatment on an airplane had exposed layers of institutional racism that extended far beyond one company or industry. As Marcus stared at the security footage of masked intruders in his home, he realized this fight would require new allies, new strategies, and a willingness to risk everything he had built. The real battle was just beginning, and the opposition was more entrenched and dangerous than anyone had imagined. "The problem isn't just United Airlines," declared Elijah Montgomery, Billionaire founder of Montgomery Media Group, as he addressed the unprecedented gathering in Marcus Harrison's private conference room. "It's the system that protects companies like United when they discriminate." Around the massive table sat 23 of the most influential black business leaders in America, collectively representing over $300 billion in market power. CEOs, founders, venture capitalists, and industry titans who had individually fought their own battles against discrimination had come together to support Marcus and Jamal. "For too long we've fought these battles separately," continued Montgomery. "We settle cases quietly. We take the money and the NDAs. We tell ourselves we're being practical. But nothing changes because the system is designed to isolate incidents and prevent pattern recognition." Marcus nodded in agreement. "United isn't afraid of my lawsuit. They're afraid of what happens if we all start comparing notes." The alliance formalized 3 immediate strategies. First, financial pressure. They would collectively announce the termination of corporate contracts with United, affecting everything, from business travel to cargo services. Second, legal coordination. Sharing information about discrimination cases across industries to establish patterns that individual NDAs couldn't hide. Third, legislative advocacy, pooling political influence, to push for federal protections against corporate retaliation when discrimination claims were filed. But they weren't the only ones forming alliances. Civil rights organizations that had initially been skeptical of a billionaire's fight joined forces with the business leaders. The National Urban League, the NAACP, and various social justice organizations recognized that Jamal's case offered a rare opportunity to expose how discrimination operated in corporate America. Reverend Calvin Jenkins, a legendary civil rights leader who had marched with Dr. King, spoke at a rally supporting the Harrisons. Some people ask why we're focusing on a rich man's son when so many poor folks face discrimination daily. Here's why. Because if they can do this to the son of Marcus Harrison, imagine what they do to our children who don't have billionaire parents to protect them. The rally drew thousands, but the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah Miller, a former United flight attendant with 20 years of service, approached Marcus after watching Reverend Jenkins speak. "I've been waiting for someone powerful enough to take them on," she explained, handing him a flash drive. "I'm not the only one. There are dozens of us who tried to report discriminatory behavior within the company. We were all silenced, transferred, or pushed out." The flash drive contained years of documented incidents: crew members making racist comments during pre-flight briefings, supervisors instructing flight attendants to provide extra scrutiny to Middle Eastern passengers, and an informal competition among some security personnel to see who could flag the most suspicious passengers of color. Most damning was a series of emails from United's former head of in-flight services explicitly instructing crew leaders to handle minority passenger complaints differently, routing them through legal rather than customer service to ensure they didn't generate statistics that might attract regulatory attention. With this insider testimony, the case transformed. It wasn't just about Jamal anymore, but about dozens of employees who had tried to do the right thing and been punished for it. Some had lost careers spanning decades because they refused to participate in discriminatory practices. The media narrative shifted dramatically. Cable news chyrons no longer read "Billionaire's son claims discrimination," but instead, United whistleblowers reveal systemic racism. International attention intensified when the United Nations Human Rights Council issued a statement expressing concern about the pattern of discrimination in commercial aviation and calling for transparent investigations. Several European and Asian airlines took the opportunity to announce enhanced anti-bias training programs, distancing themselves from United's practices. United's new CEO, Dominic Williams, the first black person to lead the company, found himself in an impossible position. Hired to signal change, he discovered that the board that had appointed him expected him to contain the scandal rather than address its causes. When he proposed a comprehensive external audit of the company's complaint handling procedures, he was rebuffed by board members concerned about potential liability. As pressure mounted from multiple directions, the airline's legal team made increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative. Their most audacious move came when they filed a countersuit against Marcus Harrison, claiming he was engaging in tortious interference with business relationships by organizing boycotts and encouraging employees to violate confidentiality agreements. The lawsuit backfired spectacularly, making United appear even more committed to silencing criticism than addressing discrimination. The judge dismissed the suit within days, calling it a transparent attempt to intimidate witnesses and obstruct justice. Meanwhile, Senator Bradford's efforts to delay congressional hearings collapsed when 3 junior senators on his committee, responding to unprecedented constituent pressure, threatened to call for an ethics investigation into his handling of the matter. Hearings were finally scheduled, with Jamal, Marcus, and former United employees invited to testify. The night before, the hearings were set to begin. Marcus received an unexpected call from Richard Pearson, the former United CEO who had resigned in disgrace after his hot mic comment. "Harrison, this has gone far enough," Pearson said, his voice tense. "People are getting nervous about where this is heading." "People should be nervous," Marcus replied calmly. "Accountability tends to make the guilty uncomfortable." "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with," Pearson continued. "This isn't just about United anymore. Other industries are watching, If employees start thinking they can expose internal practices without consequences, where does it end? With justice, hopefully, Marcus answered. Be reasonable. What's your endgame here? You've made your point. United's stock has tanked. Several executives have resigned. Isn't that enough? My endgame is systemic change, Richard. Not just at United, but everywhere discrimination is protected by corporate power, and we're just getting started. After Pearson hung up, Marcus sat thoughtfully in his office. The desperate tone in the former CEO's voice confirmed what he had suspected. Powerful interests beyond United were concerned about the precedent this case might set. The fight had grown beyond one incident, beyond one company, into a potential turning point in how corporate America handled discrimination. As he prepared for the next day's hearings, Marcus knew they were approaching a critical juncture. The opposition would make one final desperate attempt to prevent the full truth from being exposed. But with his new alliance of business leaders, civil rights organizations, and brave whistleblowers, Marcus finally had the resources to withstand whatever came next. What he couldn't predict was just how far his opponents would go to silence the truth. The Senate Transportation Committee hearing room buzzed with anticipation. News cameras lined the back wall, photographers jostled for position, and every seat in the public gallery was filled. Capitol Police had established a perimeter outside to manage the crowds of protesters carrying signs reading, "Justice for Jamal," and "End Discrimination in the Skies." Inside, Marcus and Jamal Harrison sat at the witness table alongside 5 former United employees who had come forward with evidence of discriminatory practices. Opposite them, separated by a wide aisle that felt symbolic of the divide, sat United's current leadership team and legal counsel. Senator William Chen gavelled the session to order. Today we begin hearings into allegations of systematic discrimination at United Airlines and potential industry-wide issues in commercial aviation. Our first witness is Jamal Harrison. Jamal approached the microphone with the composed dignity that had made him a powerful symbol in the ongoing battle. For 3 months he had endured character attacks, academic harassment, and death threats. Yet he remained focused on the larger purpose, ensuring no one else would experience what happened to him. "Distinguished senators," he began, "what happened to me on Flight 237 wasn't an isolated incident. It was the product of a system designed to protect discrimination rather than prevent it. I'm here today not because I'm special, but because I had resources most victims don't have." He recounted the incident in clear, unemotional terms, then expanded to describe the retaliation he had faced since speaking out. As he detailed the academic harassment at MIT and the break-in at his family home, several senators visibly recoiled. United's attorneys watched nervously as Jamal's testimony landed with undeniable impact. Their strategy had been to paint him as privileged and entitled, but his humble, fact-focused delivery undermined that narrative entirely. The momentum built as former United employees testified. Sarah Miller described being transferred to undesirable routes after reporting a captain's racist comments. James Wilson, a former gate agent, explained how minority passengers in premium cabins were routinely subjected to additional documentation checks not applied to white travelers. Michael Torres, who had worked in United's customer service department, revealed the separate tracking system for discrimination complaints that ensured they never appeared in public-facing statistics. As the testimony progressed, United's attorneys passed urgent notes to their clients. Their carefully constructed defense was crumbling as witnesses corroborated each other's accounts with specific dates, names, and documented incidents. The IE Airline's current CEO, Dominic Williams, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Hired to be the face of change, he was increasingly aware that he had been set up as a shield rather than an agent of transformation. The board had restricted his access to historical records and limited his authority to implement new policies. The hearing took an unexpected turn when Senator Bradford, United's most reliable ally on the committee, attempted to discredit Sarah Miller by questioning her employment record. "Ms. Miller, isn't it true that you were disciplined multiple times for tardiness before your transfer?" Bradford asked smugly. "Yes, Senator," she replied calmly. "After I reported discrimination, I suddenly began receiving write-ups for being 1 minute late, despite 15 years of exemplary service. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say?" Bradford's face reddened as murmurs rippled through the gallery. Before he could recover, Sarah produced documentation showing that her tardiness had been manufactured by supervisors changing shift times without notice after she had filed internal complaints. As the morning session concluded, United's legal team requested a recess to review new information. The real purpose became clear when Marcus received an urgent call during the break. "They're making one last play," his source within United whispered. "They've got Parker heading to the judge right now with an emergency injunction to prevent the release of the internal emails. They're claiming executive privilege and trade secrets." Judge Eleanor Parker had been assigned to oversee various legal aspects of the United case. Known for her strict interpretation of corporate privacy rights, she represented the airline's best hope of suppressing the most damaging evidence before it could be presented to the committee. Marcus immediately dispatched his legal team to counter this move, but they were racing against time. The afternoon session would begin in 30 minutes, and the most explosive testimony was scheduled first. As senators returned to the committee, a disturbance erupted outside. Capitol Police were clearing the building due to a security threat. Witnesses and spectators were directed to exits, effectively delaying the proceedings. "This is no coincidence," Marcus told Senator Chen as they were escorted out. "They're buying time until they can get that injunction." Chen nodded grimly. "I've seen these tactics before. We'll reconvene as soon as possible." The evacuation lasted nearly 2 hours before authorities declared the threat unfounded. During that time, United's attorneys had indeed secured a temporary restraining order from Judge Parker, preventing the disclosure of specific internal communications. When the hearing finally resumed, tension filled the room. United's team looked visibly relieved, believing they had successfully blocked the most damaging evidence. What they didn't realize was that Marcus had anticipated this move. As Michael Torres returned to the witness stand, he calmly stated, "Before continuing, I should mention that last night, fearing attempts to suppress this information, I submitted all documentary evidence to WikiLeaks with instructions to publish if the hearing was disrupted in any way." The blood drained from the faces of United's legal team. One lawyer frantically checked his phone, then whispered urgently to his colleagues. The temporary restraining order was meaningless if the documents were already public. Furthermore, Torres continued, "I provided copies to news organizations in 5 countries, since United's influence is primarily limited to American media." Senator Bradford erupted, "This is outrageous. The witness is admitting to violating court orders." "Point of order," countered Senator Chen. "The documents were shared before any court order existed, and this committee is not bound by Judge Parker's ruling regarding what testimony we can hear." As Bradford sputtered in protest, Torres methodically outlined the extensive evidence. Emails from executives explicitly discussing how to handle problem minorities in first class, training materials that taught subtle techniques for extra, scrutiny of non-white passengers, and documentation of retribution against employees who reported discrimination. Most damning was an email from a former board member responding to a proposal for anti-bias training. "Let's not create evidence of a problem we're trying to deny exists." By late afternoon, United's defense had collapsed entirely. Their own documents and internal communications had revealed a culture that not only tolerated discrimination, but had developed sophisticated methods to conceal it. As the exhausted participants prepared to conclude for the day, a commotion at the back of the room drew all eyes. Judge Parker herself had arrived, visibly angry, flanked by marshals. "This committee is in contempt of court," she announced. "I've issued an order." Senator Chen cut her off. "With all due respect, Judge Parker, congressional hearings are not subject to judicial restraining orders regarding what testimony we may hear. The separation of powers is quite clear on this matter." "Furthermore," added Senator Rodriguez, who had been unusually quiet until now, "I believe the committee should review Judge Parker's conflicts of interest in this case, including the fact that her husband's law firm represents United's insurance carriers." A stunned silence fell over the room as Judge Parker's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Without another word, she turned and left, her dramatic entrance and exit accomplishing nothing but drawing attention to her own questionable impartiality. As the hearing adjourned, journalists raced to file stories about the day's dramatic revelations. United's stock had been halted after falling another 20%. Outside, the crowds of protesters had grown, their chants echoing through the streets of Washington. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder as they left the committee room. "You did well today," he said simply. Jamal nodded, exhausted but resolute. "We all did, but it's not over yet." Indeed, the final chapter of this battle was yet to be written. The evidence presented today had laid bare not just United's discriminatory practices, but an entire system designed to protect corporate misconduct from consequences. The question now was whether that system could be reformed, or if the powerful interests behind it would find new ways to reassert control. Tomorrow's closing statements would determine whether this moment became a turning point in corporate accountability or just another scandal that faded when the news cycle moved on. 3 weeks after the explosive Senate hearings, Jamal Harrison stood at a podium in MIT's largest auditorium, facing hundreds of fellow students and faculty members. The room was silent as he prepared to speak about his experience and its aftermath. "When I boarded that flight 3 months ago," he began, "I was just a student concerned with algorithms and data patterns. I never intended to become the face of a movement or to expose systemic discrimination in one of America's largest industries. But sometimes, injustice finds you, even when you're not looking for it." The journey from victim to catalyst for change had been extraordinary. In the days following the Senate hearings, United Airlines had undergone a corporate transformation unprecedented in American business history. The board of directors, facing shareholder revolts and regulatory scrutiny, had resigned en masse. CEO Dominic Williams, finally freed from their constraints, had initiated a comprehensive overhaul of company policies, bringing in independent civil rights experts to redesign everything from hiring practices to complaint procedures. Valerie Whitman and Captain James Ritter now faced criminal charges for assault, filing false reports, and civil rights violations. Their defense that they were just following company culture had collapsed when prosecutors presented evidence that they had personally targeted dozens of minority passengers over their careers. Most significantly, the Department of Justice had expanded its investigation beyond United to examine discriminatory patterns in the entire airline industry. Preliminary findings suggested that what happened to Jamal was indeed part of a wider problem affecting multiple carriers. Senator Bradford, whose aggressive defense of United had backfired so spectacularly, announced he would not seek re-election. Investigation into his financial ties to the airline industry was ongoing. Judge Parker had been forced to recuse herself from all cases involving airlines after her conflicts of interest became public. But the most profound change had been in the public conversation about corporate discrimination. What began as a single incident had evolved into a national reckoning about how companies use their legal and financial resources to conceal patterns of bias and silence victims. The alliance of black business leaders that Marcus had assembled had established the Accountability Institute, dedicated to supporting whistleblowers and investigating discrimination claims across industries. With an initial endowment of $2 billion, it represented a powerful new force in corporate America. "What happened to me was not unique," Jamal continued in his address. "What was unique was that I had the resources to fight back. The Accountability Institute exists to ensure that everyone has those resources, regardless of their economic status or connections." He then revealed the project he had been working on when the incident occurred: an artificial intelligence system designed to detect patterns of bias in automated decision-making. Originally focused on facial recognition technology, he had expanded it to analyze complaint data and identify statistical anomalies that might indicate systematic discrimination. "Companies claim these are isolated incidents," Jamal explained. "But data doesn't lie. When we analyze thousands of complaints across years of operations, patterns emerge that can't be explained by coincidence. My algorithm doesn't just identify that discrimination exists. It can pinpoint exactly where in the process it occurs and who enables it." Several major corporations had already voluntarily submitted to analysis using Jamal's technology, eager to demonstrate their commitment to unbiased practices in the new climate of accountability. Others had reluctantly agreed after pressure from investors concerned about potential liability. The transformation extended beyond corporate America. Congress was considering the Harrison Act, comprehensive legislation that would strengthen protections for discrimination claimants and whistleblowers, while increasing penalties for companies that engaged in cover-ups or retaliation. As Jamal concluded his address, he reflected on the personal cost of the past 3 months. The threats, the attempts to destroy his academic career, the invasion of his family's home, all had taken a toll. Yet he had emerged stronger, more focused, and more committed to using his privileges to create change for those without his advantages. "When that flight attendant slapped me," he said, "she didn't just attack me personally. She struck at the fundamental idea that all Americans deserve equal treatment and dignity. The appropriate response to such an attack isn't just to seek justice for oneself, but to ensure justice becomes accessible to everyone." Later that evening, Jamal joined his father for dinner at their favorite restaurant in Cambridge, finally able to enjoy a meal without security guards hovering nearby. The threat level had diminished as United's former executives faced their own legal problems, and public attention shifted to the positive changes emerging from the scandal. "I'm proud of you," Marcus told his son. "Not just for standing your ground, but for understanding that this fight was always bigger than one incident or one airline." Jamal nodded thoughtfully. "I keep thinking about all the people who experienced what I did, or worse, but couldn't fight back. How many careers were derailed? How many people were humiliated or criminalized simply for expecting equal treatment? That's why the Institute is so important," Marcus replied. "This can't just be about wealthy people protecting themselves. It has to create a mechanism for everyone to hold power accountable." As they discussed the future, Marcus revealed that he had been approached about serving on a presidential commission examining corporate accountability structures across all industries. The United case had opened a door to addressing systemic issues that extended far beyond airlines. Meanwhile, Jamal had received interest from multiple federal agencies in implementing his bias detection algorithm as a regulatory tool. What began as a student project could become part of the national infrastructure for ensuring equal treatment under the law. The most surprising development had come just that morning. A letter from Sarah Miller, the former United flight attendant who had risked everything to testify. She had been hired as the new director of equity training for the restructured United Airlines, with authority to redesign how flight crews were trained to interact with all passengers. "Sometimes justice does prevail," Jamal observed, "but only when people are willing to risk everything to expose the truth." As they finished their meal, Jamal's phone buzzed with a news alert. United Airlines had settled the class action lawsuit filed on behalf of passengers and employees who had experienced discrimination. Beyond substantial financial compensation, the settlement included a commitment to transparent reporting of all discrimination complaints and mandatory independent review of how they were handled. More significantly, the settlement prohibited the use of non-disclosure agreements in discrimination cases, ensuring that victims could speak openly about their experiences. This single provision, now being adopted by other companies fearing similar litigation, promised to transform how corporate America handled bias incidents. Jamal smiled as he showed his father the news. "This is what real change looks like," he said. "Not just punishing bad actors, but changing the systems that protected them." Marcus nodded in agreement. One flight, one incident of disrespect, and look at all that came from it. "Because we refuse to be silenced," Jamal added. As they left the restaurant, a young black woman approached tentatively. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Jamal Harrison? I just wanted to thank you. I'm a flight attendant with American, and your case has completely changed how our company operates. We just completed new training that actually addresses the biases we've seen for years, but weren't allowed to discuss." Jamal thanked her graciously, still uncomfortable with his celebrity, but grateful that his ordeal had created positive change. As they parted ways, Marcus observed, "That's your real legacy. Not the lawsuit or the hearings, but all the people who will never have to experience what you did because you fought back." What began with a slap had culminated in a transformation of corporate accountability in America. The journey had been painful, the opposition fierce, but ultimately, justice had prevailed, not just for one privileged young man, but potentially for millions who would benefit from the new structures and protections established in the wake of Flight 237. The story of Jamal Harrison teaches us several profound lessons about confronting discrimination in modern America. First, it demonstrates how privilege can be used responsibly. Marcus didn't just protect his son, but leveraged his resources to create systemic change benefiting all victims of discrimination. Second, it reveals how institutions often protect themselves rather than address injustice, designing elaborate systems to conceal patterns of bias while isolating incidents as misunderstandings. Third, it highlights the critical importance of documentation and evidence in fighting discrimination. Jamal's recorded video transformed a potential he said, she said situation into irrefutable proof. Perhaps most importantly, this story illustrates that real change requires collective action. One family, even a wealthy one, couldn't transform an entire industry alone. It took whistleblowers, allies across racial and economic lines, media, attention, political pressure, and consumer boycotts working in concert. When discrimination is embedded in systems, dismantling those systems requires multifaceted approaches. The case also demonstrates how technology can be harnessed for accountability. Jamal's algorithm for detecting bias patterns represents a new frontier in civil rights enforcement, using data to expose discrimination that might otherwise remain hidden behind corporate secrecy. Finally, we learn that justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoers, but creating new structures that prevent future harm. The most lasting impact of Flight 237 wasn't the penalties against individuals, but the transformation of industry practices and the establishment of new accountability mechanisms. What experiences with discrimination have you witnessed or experienced that went unchallenged? Have you ever been in a situation where you wished you had recorded evidence of mistreatment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in the importance of holding corporations accountable for discrimination, please like and subscribe to support more stories that expose injustice and celebrate those brave enough to fight back. Thank you for watching, and remember, change happens only when we refuse to be silenced. Together, we can create a more just world where dignity and respect are afforded to everyone regardless of their appearance or background.